Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 6 of Navigating NewSpace, produced by the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program. My name is Shayna Hume, and I'm the host for this segment and a 2018 alumni of the program. The MAT Fellowship is a highly selective summer internship and mentorship program, which we hope will nurture the ethical exploration of the next generation of space leaders. If you want to learn more about the fellowship, we'll give you information about our upcoming application cycle and our social media at the end of the stream. Today, I am so excited to welcome Class of 2019 Fellow Aaron Pickard. Aaron is currently an assembly, test, and integration engineer at Tyvak Nano-Satellite Systems. He recently graduated from Columbia University, where he studied computer science and Talmud in the Jewish Theological Seminary. In the past, he's interned at NASA Langley and during his MIFP internship at OneWeb. Aaron is also active in the Space Generation Advisory Council, an international volunteer organization for young space advocates, which is partnered with the United Nations. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
How are you doing?
I'm doing real well. I had a great day at work, and now I'm talking with you guys.
Fantastic. I love talking to our fellows that are in the workforce because even though we have to wait till evening, they have so many good examples of what it's like to go into the commercial space industry. So to kick, you were saying?
I'm just excited to share them.
Absolutely. So to kick us off, I had a whole bunch of questions about the MAT Fellowship and your experience in it. Hopefully that can help people who are keeping an eye out for our applications opening. Do you mind if we dive right into those?
Of course. Let's go.
Okay, sounds good. So just to start off, what was being in the MAT Fellowship like for you? What was your experience as a second-year fellow?
It was really, I come from a background that's probably not traditionally associated with aerospace. And I wasn't sure after my internship at NASA whether that was going to be a one-off experience or whether this was a direction that it was really viable for me to pursue. So to be part of the fellowship was really validating, to have a community of fellows and alumni and mentors and peers and colleagues at the host company to engage with on a daily basis about the commercial space sector was just inspiring. And it was a really great experience.
That's so cool. How did you find your way to NASA Langley originally?
So I did a competition my freshman year called Revolutionary Aerospace Systems Concepts Academic Linkage, or RASCL. Basically, NASA puts out through the National Institute of Aerospace a series of 5 design prompts, and they get students to design architectures in response to them. Then they take the top, I don't know, it depends on the year, the top few architectures and bring them to Florida for a symposium to learn about them, to learn about the industry. And I did that my freshman year. My team was a finalist. So I flew down to the Cape and I had a really great time. And I was interested in this theoretical mission design work. And so I applied for an internship with one of the branches at Langley that does that work, where some of the civil servants are actually involved with the competition. And I was lucky enough to be selected.
Okay, very cool. And so following that, was it immediately to the MAT Fellowship and to OneWeb?
It was not super immediate. I knew I was interested in space. I knew I was interested in the whole domain of space, commercial and civil and security. And I wasn't sure what would stick. So I applied to a lot of different opportunities. Within the fellowship, I was particularly interested in OneWeb because I really believe in the company's mission. I think it's worth doing. I think it's worth putting resources into. So MAT Fellowship was apparent, but it wasn't apparent that that was the only way forward. Within the fellowship, I think I was pretty interested in OneWeb from the beginning.
And for those who aren't familiar, what's the mission of OneWeb and companies like it?
OneWeb, at least until recently, its mission was to provide satellite-based internet services to the world, which is great because you can't run a landline everywhere, and the bringing internet to places where you can't run a landline will make it easier to increase the level of education in those places. It'll connect them to the world in ways that are important for humanitarian and economic reasons.
Very cool. So OneWeb's not the only company. There's obviously a couple of different projects and companies that are interested in this internet all over the world concept. Do you think the market is saturated, or do you think we might see more companies pop up to replace them?
I don't know. I think the issue is not so much whether it's saturated or not, it's whether the technology is really viable at a good price point for consumers at this point.
Okay. What do you think? Is that an okay question to ask?
Sure. The answer is I don't know. OneWeb had a really hard time with it. They went into bankruptcy. They're in the process of being recovered from bankruptcy by a consortium of an Indian telecom company and the UK government. And I don't know how that's going to affect their mission or their architecture plans. But the company before it went under was a unicorn. It had really raised a lot of capital. And so the fact that they weren't able to do it doesn't make me super optimistic that somebody else is going to be able to. Granted, the competition in the space is impressive. Elon Musk is backing it with SpaceX's Starlink project. Amazon is back in exploring a similar concept with Project Kuiper. They both have incredible amounts of cash on hand. So we'll see if they can do it. The question is, can they do it at speeds that are attractive to consumers, that compare favorably to more traditional internet services providers in places where they exist? And can they do this at a price point where the hardware they're asking consumers to buy is affordable? And it's that last question that bugs me, that I don't have a good answer to.
And now this view doesn't represent the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program, but I know a lot of us would like an alternative to Comcast, so I would love to see some competition in that space. And once I get distracted away from Comcast burns, returning back to your fellowship with OneWeb. So what was it like coming in as a MAC fellow? How did that change the internship experience in general for you?
It was my first internship in private industry, and it was my first internship in enterprise software development environment. So it was a new experience and kind of hard for me to compare to the internships I had in the past for that reason. I think it gave me a community beyond my colleagues at the company, which was really important because I was working outside Washington, D.C. I was living in D.C. I'd never lived in D.C. before. So it gave me a sort of remote community that I really appreciated. And it gave me additional perspectives on the industry. When you're interning at a company, you're learning about that company's take on the industry. What is their technology stack? What is their plan to reach the market? What is their market? And by having, or by being an Isakowitz Fellow, I was privileged to not only understand that about my host company in some detail, but also on some level about all the other host companies through learning from all the fellows informally.
Who's your mentor while you were at OneWeb?
My mentor was Jeff Manber, who runs NASA.
Sorry, you cut out there for a moment. Can you repeat that?
Certainly. My mentor was Jeff Manber, who at the time was running NanoRacks. I believe he still is. I'm just not sure.
Very cool. So how was that experience having a mentor from another satellite company while you were exploring that niche?
The experience was really interesting. He gave a lot of good feedback. We didn't really talk about the NanoRacks concept, the OneWeb concept. It was really more hearing about his experience, because he is one of the pioneers of the industry. He got all before commercial space was all the way back in the Cold War was winding down. And so it was great to get historical where the industry was and how far it's come, because I'm a believer that that's going to be where the
That's super interesting. I had a similar experience with my mentor in 2018 during my internship. And I think that's one thing that all of us have in common as fellows. We find these mentors who challenge us to look at the past transitioning into the future of the industry.
That's one of the things about it.
Yeah, I think all of us, we all agree on that. So the summit, was the summit at the end of your internship, in the middle, or?
It was in the middle. I think it was week 6 or week 7 for me. And it was the time of my life. I'd never been to LA before. And I don't know. I don't know how going back there. I only live an hour or so outside now. But I don't know how I can top that 3-day experience. It was just so fun.
So obviously the question lends itself. What took place at your summit? What were the highlights?
The highlight. Meeting all the other fellows in person. I was one of 2 in that summer, which led to some really great opportunities, but also meant that most of my engagement with the class was and it was great for 3 days to really be co-located with them and able to talk with them spontaneously. And it was fun to do that. I thought the tours were really incredible. The family lined up some amazing opportunities for us to learn from the folks over at Virgin Orbit, and SpaceX, and Boeing. It was really great to see how they operate, because I was sitting at a desk coding all day for my trip. I was outside satellite operation. I'd never been in a clean room. I'd never been in a high bay before, because I've got a software background. I hadn't worked with hardware at this point yet. So the opportunity to see the rockets, to see the satellites as they're built, as they're tested, was really cool from, I guess, the perspective of approaching other elements to the industry. I also loved some of the people we were able to speak with. We got FaceTime with Elon Musk. We met Buzz Aldrin. We saw George Whitesides on the panel. They're all 3 class acts, great people, and it was incredible to engage with them like professionals. I'm sorry, you cut out there?
Oh, my mistake. I was trying to do some behind the scenes magic and pull up the photo of your bus when you all found out that Elon Musk was right outside, but I don't think I was able to do it quick enough to make it happen seamlessly. What I was going to ask you was which guest was the most surprising for you? Or maybe the most exciting?
Elon Musk was definitely the most exciting. I'd actually heard Buzz Aldrin speak about a week ahead of time. He was actually a special surprise guest at an Apollo panel conversation with Michael Collins at CW that I went to as part of the whole Apollo 11 50th anniversary celebration. So I'd heard him speak about his vision for space and deep space exploration the week prior, and it was great to meet him in person. I mean, how often do you have the opportunity to say hello to someone who has viscerally changed your life? But the surprise of getting to learn from Elon Musk was really something.
The fellowship does such a good job of that. You know that it's an amazing program coming in and that you're going to experience something incredible, and then they just manage to shock you a little bit further each time.
It's impressive.
So I think I'll dangle that photo and video that if you stick around and you watch enough of these videos, for any viewers, you might eventually be able to see the photo of their bus when they found out they were about to meet Elon Musk. And trust me, those facial expressions are not something you want to miss. They are beautiful. So you are past the summit now. You know, it's been another year and you have graduated Columbia. Congratulations, by the way. That's amazing.
Thank you.
How has the Matthew program, how has it stayed in your life in different ways since it ended?
First of all, I think it showed me that I have a place in the commercial space industry, and it really inspired me to pursue that. That became the focus of my job search as I approached graduation. And I think that's just the most significant thing for me as a recent graduate, that it directed my job search towards something in the commercial space industry. It showed me also that entrepreneurship is fun, entrepreneurship is interesting, entrepreneurship is important, and longer term, I don't know where I'm going to wind up, but I would like to do something entrepreneurial. I think working in the private sector for an important cause like space exploration is important, and I want to continue doing it.
Absolutely. I think, again, myself, the rest of us listening, you've got a lot of people who agree with you in the audience that it's something important that needs to be done. Okay, so transitioning a little bit, we have talked about how the Matthew program influenced you, how you weren't sure exactly whether you wanted to stay in space after NASA Langley. After the fellowship ended, what do you think? Are you staying with space?
Yeah. Oh, that's not even a question at this point. My concern about whether I would be able to stay in space had less to do with what my interests were and more with if there was demand in the market for my skills. I think the validation of the fellowship was that there is, in fact, a market for my skills. And so there's no good reason for me to not stay in space. Hopefully I'll be able to go there one day.
Definitely. Would you go to the moon?
That's tough. I don't know. I'd want to see the architecture because I feel like I'm at the point where I can have intelligent thoughts about whether something is safe or not. And like, for example, I'd have loved to fly on an Apollo type spacecraft. The shuttle would have scared me. The lack of redundancy in its systems, I think, would have been unnerving. So it'll really depend on what architecture is flying and what the price point is.
That makes sense. It's kind of like once you know how an airplane works, suddenly you look outside the window when you're flying and you're just like, really? I got into this thing? Maybe that joke works a bit better for helicopters. Aerospace engineers will know. Okay, so you're staying in space. You're interested in these satellite systems, obviously. You're with Tyvak. I know we can't talk too much about work today, but what do you see for the next 5 years of your career?
5 years.
Ish, give or take.
I'm really loving the work I'm doing at Tyvak. Assembly, integration, and test is very fun. I'm learning a ton because I have a software background and AI&T is a lot of hardware stuff. And I'm enjoying it. So I'd like to continue doing that. I'd be interested in potentially starting to transition over to systems engineering at some point. I'd be interested in potentially going back for graduate work in systems engineering. I don't know if I need a degree in business if I'm interested in transitioning over to business, but that's something I would also think seriously about. I don't think I'm going to pursue a PhD. I just don't think I need it in order to do the technical work that I want to do, that I'm really passionate about, that I care about. But yeah, either industry or grad school, but probably a combination of both, and test or systems engineering, I think.
Absolutely. And so besides going to the moon on a safe vehicle, that is, do you have any moonshots for your life in space?
For my life, no.
For humanity in space?
For humans in space, sure. I'd love to see humanity get to a point where we're commercializing the moon with people there. I think we're not yet I know we're not yet really at that point for low Earth orbit. So if we can accomplish that in or around the Earth and then take that to the next level to go to the moon, would really be incredible. I'd like to see a sustained human presence on Mars. I think that would really be great. And I'd like to see satellite-based internet at commercial prices for everybody. I think that cause is really important. I think connectivity to the internet enables all sorts of benefits in terms of health and education and economics. And if we could do that, I would be thrilled.
Let's chat about that for a sec, because I know a little bit about the topic, but not very much. So I can only assume that others also feel a little bit of a blank spot. Bringing internet to people all over the world. Is this just giving them access to social media and more app games? How will it change quality of life?
I haven't studied the problem, but I think that it's proven. When you have internet access, then telehealth becomes much more high fidelity if it's already available. If it's not already available, then it becomes available. And I think that's going to do wonders for people who don't have in-person access to medical care. To be able to Skype a doctor will be huge. I think it's going to improve the quality of education. Right now, as a result of COVID, we're seeing a lot of learning transition to remote instruction. If that remote instruction can reach more people who otherwise wouldn't have had access to any of that sort of education, I think that has the potential to radically improve the students' quality of life. By connecting to the internet, you wind up connecting to all sorts of retailers. That is good, at least in a traditional Western sense, for the economy. So I'd be really excited to see that. And through the internet, people also connect with their families. And so there's a real humanitarian drive in my mind to get as many people as possible online. And I think satellites will eventually, if not immediately, be the best way to do that.
Absolutely. I hadn't really thought about what you just said about connecting families. Oftentimes, when resources aren't available, people of young generations have to make their own way, travel beyond their home country. And just being able to connect with family and especially older relatives is a really important thing that global internet would bring to us that we don't currently have. That's super interesting. We were frozen for a moment. I think we're both back. As always, we have to battle the post-work bandwidth where everyone is fighting for the same. Okay. So looking forward, we have a lot to look forward to. There's a lot of technologies that are coming forward in space, and obviously you're interested in some of the most revolutionary. But in space in general, what challenges do you really see our generation having to face as we move into engineering and management leadership roles?
The challenge you're asking about, the challenges we're going to face as we enter leadership, or the challenges our generation is going to face in space? What challenges are emerging in commercial?
Ooh, both. Is both an acceptable answer? Yeah, what challenges will exist because of commercial space specifically? There was a different set of challenges for other generations, but what will we face now that our predecessors haven't yet?
So because commercial space is approaching the point where we're going to be sending, hopefully, humans into space on a regular basis under the auspices of commercial flight providers and probably governmental supervision, I think we're going to need to start having different conversations about the ethics of spaceflight. I think governments can sort of do what they want because their word is literally the law, subject to regulations and laws. But when you have companies providing that service, and that service is seen as dangerous, then I think the ethics are going to become more complicated. I think we're going to have to learn how to manage our orbits a lot better than we're currently doing. Space is crowded, especially in lower orbits and geostationary orbits, and it's only going to get more so as mega constellations become popular. I love them for what they can do for humanity, but I acknowledge that they pose real risks to other satellites in their orbits or near their orbits. And we have got to get better at space traffic management. I think that's going to be a real market, if not immediately, then certainly over the next 5 to 10 years. I think we've got ethics, we've got space traffic management. What's the next big challenge? I don't know. We haven't seen it yet. I think we're emerging where EO is effectively commercialized with uncrewed spacecraft. We're entering into the age where LEO is effectively commercialized with crewed spacecraft, and we're entering into the age where commercial spacecraft are starting to move to the moon. And I think the challenge that we haven't yet anticipated, or that I haven't yet specifically anticipated, is going to relate to the commercialization of the moon. I don't know what it is, though.
Good answer. You never know what's going to come next. To combine something you said, though, you really got me thinking when you were talking about ethics and space traffic management at the same time. So much of the time, in my experience, when we talk about space traffic management, we talk about what is technologically possible. Who do you think has a moral or ethical imperative to take responsibility for space traffic management?
I think if you're putting a satellite in space, that is to say it's your satellite there, then you have a responsibility to act ethically with it. I think launch services providers rather have a responsibility to do what they can to ensure that their payloads are acting responsibly. I think governments have a responsibility to regulate the payloads, but ultimately it's the payload operators who I think have that moral obligation to at least do no harm to their orbits.
Leave it better than you found it. Boy Scout rules.
Yep.
Okay, so to wrap up, I've been asking all of our interviewees the same question so far, and so I'll put it on the screen because it hasn't changed one bit. As we've talked about before, we don't want to leave a blank there because we don't want to name the things that are happening this year. We specifically want to acknowledge all of the things that are happening. But the point is, when resources are finite and sometimes limited, we don't yet live in Max's world of total abundance from last week's interview. Given everything that's happening and the finiteness of what we deal with, how do you justify our investments in time and money and effort into space flight? Obviously, we think space is amazing. But where is its value for everyone else? And how can we really justify this effort in a way that shows people that we are helping humanity?
I think space is a force multiplier for doing good in the world. I'm happy to justify that on the basis of national security. I'm happy to justify that on the basis of commerce. With my whole point about small satellites connecting the world and the benefits of having internet if you can't get internet through a landline or a more traditional approach. With national security, I think it comes down to the fact that the world, or not the world, I'll say our country is a better place because it's a more secure one. And then we learn when we go to space. Space is a key location where scientific experiments that have an outsized impact on our understanding of the universe and on humanity's place within it occur. And for that reason, I think it's important to continue putting effort into our study of space and our study of how humans and other organisms act within it.
Amazing. Thank you, Aaron. I really appreciate those thoughts. So, finally, and last of all, space is confusing. It's fast, and it moves fast every day on Earth. Commercial space is a rapidly evolving niche of the industry, and sometimes, even for those who are already linked into it, like us, it can still be difficult to find out what's going on. For those who want to stay more abreast of what's happening in commercial space, what would you recommend?
I'd recommend following space industry-specific news sites. I'm a huge fan of spacenews.com. Spaceflight now is also another good one. But the thing that I really think if you're not doing this, you're not going to have your finger on the pulse of the industry. You got to follow industry executive Twitter accounts. Elon Musk, Tory Bruno, other leaders and titans of the industry are on Twitter, and they're taking questions from people like us, people who are either new in the industry or not even in the engage with corporations through their Twitter accounts or leaders through their accounts is huge. If you've got a question about the Atlas rocket, you can ask Tory Bruno, and he will probably answer it if it hasn't been answered before, and there's like no better way to find out. That's incredible. It's not FaceTime, but the opportunity to engage directly with industry leaders on Twitter, I think, is something you should not be passing up.
I agree. I think the democratization of space through social media is one of my favorite things. And I'll throw a pitch out for Tory Bruno. I'm not an active Twitter user. I can barely figure it out. And the other week, I actually logged on and I tweeted at him after a talk he gave online. And I said, hey, great haircut and mustache. And he actually tweeted back to me about that. So he said thanks. So you can reach out. It doesn't have to always be with a question. They will interact with you just as if you're on their level all the time. Okay, so that is all we have for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today and to talk about all of these things. I really appreciate all of your time and your insights.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Can't wait to talk to you again soon. So for everyone else who might want to follow Aaron, Aaron has provided us with both his LinkedIn and his Twitter account, not Captain Pickard, so that you can learn more about what he's interested in satellites, or maybe even some retweets from Tory or Elon. If you'd like to learn more, you can follow these and return to this video to find them. If you'd like to learn more about the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship, whose applications are coming up very soon, learn more at the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship.org website, or find us at Matt Fellowship on any of our social medias. We might not be an aerospace CEO, but we do like to interact on social media, and we will respond to anything you can shoot at us. Can't wait to talk to you next time. See you next week.